Let's go ahead and begin. Welcome to our information session regarding our new department, the Center for Student Involvement. And my name is Pat Bosco. Look around this room and you're kind of impressed with the Wildcat Chambers. That's the name of the facility that you're in now as part of the renovation, for our $31 million renovation of our K-State Student Union. About 15 years ago, the students were on our second renovation of our building, and they had a little extra money, and they were going to put money on the plaza. And we had several ideas, and some bike rack, maybe a stage out on the plaza, or a fountain. And there were 15 of our student leaders in the room. And I said, "Oh, a fountain! That's a horrible idea. Put a fountain on the campus. We have vandalism when it's not operating. It looks kind of lousy. It's just it mechanically breaks down. Don't do a fountain. Do something else." They all nodded, and they voted 15 to nothing to build a fountain in the plaza. And then this past year, the student government had a little extra money, and they were thinking about building a chamber like this. And we had spruced up, Bill Schmurger is here, our executive director of Student Union. We had spruced up the Big 12 room. Thought that was pretty cool. It had Wi-Fi and new carpeting, and I went ahead and said, gang, you could use the money for a lot of different things. Don't build something like the chamber you're talking about. Then they voted 49 to nothing to build this beautiful room. So in terms of student involvement, student leadership, it's alive and well. The merger we're talking about is a merger of two university departments in student life that work directly with student organizations with our approximately 500 student groups. The merger is to merge the Student Activities and Organizations Office with our Office of Fraternities and Sororities. That's Bill Harlan and Ben Hopper's shops. They both report to Heather Reed, which is our Assistant Vice President. They continue to report directly to her. This merger is to benefit all of our student organizations. And I want to tell you about the why as we go through this, so we're all on the same page in terms of why this merger is important to the history of our university and to student life. We want to make sure we communicate with and connect with all groups to resources that are a consistent way of reorganizing and consolidating offices, as I mentioned, to achieve our goals of maximizing student leadership and really honoring the independence of our student organizations. The reorganization aims to clarify the university's role and obligations, including risk management and overseeing departmental student organizations, which we'll talk about that. Some of you represent what we think are departmental student organizations, and we want to talk through that and the rules and responsibilities related to that, while respecting the independence and autonomy of independent student organizations, including the responsibility for their own risk management. Now, to clarify the relationship we have with student organizations is critically important. We have, there's been some misunderstandings that have been there for a very long time. This is not a new subject for us at the university. We have great autonomy. We have exercised independence over our student organizations, but yet there's a myth out there that somehow we control activities that we clearly do not. So this gives us an opportunity to be real, to put ourselves in a position where we're clarifying the role that the university has with independent student organizations. And it gives us a chance to clarify the responsibilities and the definitions for those departmental clubs, that missions are akin to your department, your college, or your major unit. That's why we're doing this. And I appreciate the fact that we have Jack Ayers here. We've involved our IFC and Panhellenic and our NPHC as we work through the process. Now, the process was a quick one. It's one that we feel we need to put in place so that we start the new year fresh, and with your help, we'll be able to answer any questions you have about this merger. Just like the, just make sure that you know that this is an important part of our university history. Student organizations, obviously, are an important part of our culture. Student governance and the independent nature of our groups has been a hallmark. I'm a product of those activities and programs. And this is an opportunity for us to strengthen and clarify our relationships as we move forward with nearly 500 student groups. With that, Heather is going to answer all your questions because I'm going to leave my stay.
No
Heather's
pressure.
going to answer your questions, and we expect a lot of them. This is an important topic for us, and it's a work in progress as we work with you to try to make sure that we strengthen our relationship with our student groups. Heather?
All right, thank you. So some of the things that won't change, I thought we'd just lay those out to begin with. So all of our student organizations, whether they be department or independent student organizations, still have most of the same benefits that they had in the past. So the online portal, the org sync that we use for registration, for communication, for students to put in their leadership and the listing of their members, is all still available to all our groups. Facility use, just like before, student groups can apply to use the union, can use the facilities here on campus just like before. We also have had information materials, and we'll continue to do that for each one as I talk to you about our categories. We'll have informational materials available about not only the Center for Student Involvement, but we'll also have them individually for each one of our categories of student organizations. And of course, they can still apply for student government funding through our allocations process with SGA. There's going to be some changes we'll need to do on the wording for SGA as far as different types of funding, but it will all be combined so student groups can still apply for that funding. And of course, there'll be email available for student organizations to use on behalf of their groups. So it's kind of interesting to see the breakup or breakdown of all our different student organizations. And these are just approximate numbers, but it gives you an idea of the breadth of the kinds of student organizations that we have here on campus. And so you can see how those 375 plus organizations all break out into the categories. And these were typical categories that the previous OSAS offices had used to identify the different groups, categories, but now we've taken that and we've incorporated it into a liaison type of organization where we'll have staff within the Center for Student Involvement who will then liaise with each one of these student categories. And this includes both independent student organizations and department student organizations. So this is the kind of support we provide to everyone, all of our groups. So in the next slide, we'll see some of those benefits that a liaison would provide to the different categories from the last slide. They'll be providing direct support to the organizations and be assistance with like registration, organizational development, training, information on best practices, on a variety of topics that we've really looked at this as an opportunity to really upgrade the kind of resources and help that we've provided to student organizations, but now we can do that across all of the organizations, all the categories in a more intentional manner and based on more of an idea from them what they need to provide the support they need to be the very best organizations they can be. So things like leadership development, risk management, events planning. We'll have workshops, brown bags, one-on-one sessions with student organizations and leaders about what they need in those areas and provide them support for doing the work. On how to run a good meeting, best practice financially. So DSOs, as we get into, will have their finances run through your departments. But for an ISO, they're going to be independent. They're going to have their own bank accounts. So general best practices on how you would run the financials for a student organization. We'll cover those kinds of skills. We'll help them with rental, as they are doing events. If they need to have this beautiful room for their event, we'll help them know how to apply for facility use. Obviously, as they develop their organizations, the better they're bringing on, they're developing their leaders and bringing on new members to their organizations, the stronger their organizations are going to be. Working with advisors is important, and we can also be a point of contact for any national or regional organization leaders that if they have an organization that also has a national or a regional component, we can help them communicate with those leaders for their organizations. Okay, with that then, Bill is going to talk to you about the differences, which is the real crux of our meeting today. The differences between a department-sponsored student organization, a DSO, and an independent student organization.
Okay. So while the slide on the screen is going to have some very detailed and specific language, I'm going to try to summarize what it is for you. I'm not going to give you the official language, but if you have questions about something you're reading that I'm not covering, please feel free to ask those now, or we're going to do, obviously, a ton of questions at the end. So as you look at the department student organization, a departmental student organization, and an independent student organization, it's about helping the group find which category that they are and helping them move in that direction. So what that means is a departmental student organization is going to be kind of the antithesis of an independent student organization. And that means the department that's sponsoring them is going to supervise them. They are a part of the university itself. It's no longer it depends on if it is an official event, so maybe our group is doing something official today, but tomorrow when we travel, it's not gonna be that anymore. A departmental student organization is a part of the university. And so that implies some responsibility, some liability, and some requirements on behalf of that that sponsoring department in regards to their organization. So yes, that is a change. We've always considered all of our student organizations to be independent. With influence, surely, and some of these, especially like the academic departments, the tie is obviously very close to the mission of the department or university group, but still independent. And so this is the part that's changing. The independents actually aren't changing that much, but we're saying, okay, if you're gonna act on behalf of the university, you're gonna become part of the university. So that's fundamentally the biggest change that's happening, yeah. So DSO activities must be supervised. What that means will vary based on the activity, but it means that the department or the person who's in that department who's responsible for working with the organization is supervising what's happening. It doesn't mean they have to be there every time, but they have to have reasonable control over what's happening so that if they're not there, what they expect to happen is what's happening. So you have approval authority over DSOs. And that's a couple things. One, it means that when student organizations are making a decision about whether they will be a DSO or an ISO, as a department, you have the final say in that. No ISO can force themselves onto your department. It's a mutual decision. You have to be willing to accept them and work with them and meet these requirements. It also means then moving forward that as issues arise with a constitution of the organization or the officers of the organization, you have authority over the DSO. If you need to make a change, you have the ability to make that change. Now, our assumption is that all the great advisors who have been working with student organizations are going to continue working with student organizations and will still be very good at guiding them and not telling them what to do. But when push comes to shove, the department has the authority over a DSO. Yeah.
So are we presuming that at this point in time, everyone is an ISO?
In effect, yes. Until and we'll talk a little bit about the registration process that we're going to do this fall and how we determine this. But the default situation is it's an independent student organization until a department says we're sponsoring you. Correct. Yeah.
It almost sounds like it's advantageous for a lot of reasons to
We'll talk a lot about that coming up. After we do some descriptions, what we're actually going to have is a slide comparing DSOs and ISOs. And I think that will make it really clear for you. But if it doesn't, just look at me and say the same thing. And I'll know what you're talking about, okay? The other situation this creates, if a DSO is a part of the university itself, then when I'm a student and I'm working in a DSO activity, we often use like a college ambassador group as one of our most common examples. You know, we imagine those in most colleges will become DSOs. You're out there working on behalf of your college. Well, this is going to establish some protections for those students because you're acting on behalf of the college. You may, as far as be able to sign something I didn't even know existed until this summer, the official K-State volunteer form, which means you are acting on behalf of the university. So you have some Tort Claims Act protection.
Liability.
What's that? Yeah, you're protected for some liability because you're acting on behalf of the university. So it's taking what we used to distance ourselves from and saying, okay, if you're really working for us, we're going to treat you like that instead of the situation that we have right now. So we're going to talk briefly about ISOs to help make the difference, hopefully. Obviously, as we've already explained, ISOs are not a part of the university. We don't value them any less. We hope the experience is just as good. It's just that they have independence and autonomy from the university. There's a lot of extra stuff in there that we'll cover more in the slide that compares the two. But if a group that has traditionally worked with your department does become an ISO, then there may be some implications for how your department and your faculty and the advisor of that group begin to interact with them because you do have to respect that independence. So sometimes there's a lot of confusion when a student organization is wanting to bring a speaker to campus and you have to sign a contract for them. They always want the university to sign, and that's what obviously the performer wants to have happen because there's a much better chance that K-State can pay the bill than a 20-year-old president of an organization. As an advisor to an independent student organization, which we'll talk about in a second here, is not a part of your job anymore. It's a volunteer thing that you're doing for the good of that group, but you should not be signing any kind of contract on behalf of yourself or the university. The independent student organizations have to keep their money outside of the university. And that includes foundation accounts. So student organizations that have had the opportunity to set up these foundation accounts, if you become an ISO or stay an ISO, that money has to come out of those accounts because the foundation is for the purpose of benefiting the university. And so if you're not a part of that, then you're outside. Other simple things, it's being involved in the day-to-day operations of that group, making travel arrangements, transportation arrangements, things like that. And then also giving credit for service to ISOs as credit to the university. So I alluded to this a minute ago. Service to an independent student organization as an advisor, which we still hope many of you do if you're called upon by that ISO because it's so valuable and important, but it is independent of your job. If you are working with a student organization because your job description says you should, then that needs to be resolved either changing your job description or making them a DSO. If it's your job, then we have to address that. But that doesn't mean you can't lend your expertise and your knowledge to them outside of work. We're not prohibiting that at all. And then this is really, I guess it highlights a couple of the differences. If you've ever heard the attorney presentation about how as an advisor to a student organization, traditionally in the past, you've been considered to be doing that as a part of your service to the university community, so you're covered under some liability protection and things like that. Now with this change, this is letting you know that if you're serving as an advisor to an ISO, you do not have that university protection anymore because it is a volunteer opportunity. The other thing that's changing in regards to ISOs and their advisors is the fact that ISOs will no longer be required to have an advisor. DSOs must, ISOs do not need to. They can report it in their registration process still, and we will continue to interact with them, just like we do with advisors right now, communicating with them, happily visiting with them, but they don't have to do it. And if they do choose someone, it can be a community member now. It does not have to be from the university community. Just like if you're doing it outside of your own free time, then someone who's outside the university can also serve in that role. You can continue to have multiple people as well. And so this just highlights that, as a staff in the Center for Student Involvement, we will be doing the same thing. We will be providing best practices, guidance, resources, but we're not going to be involved in the day-to-day operations of an ISO either. So we're not setting a double standard here. As an employee of the university, we will have that distance as well when it comes to day-to-day ISO activities. So here's the one everyone probably wants to see. The difference between a department student organization and an independent student organization. We'll just highlight a couple of these. Again, DSO, university itself. ISO retains their autonomy, not a part of the university. DSOs must have an advisor. It should be a part of their job description, or at least an expectation of their department. And I should clarify, we've said department a million times. College, department, unit, it's not a academic department that we're referring to. It's an official K-State entity that exists. But department is easier to say than that list. The department has authority, an ISO, they have the autonomy. Their constitution should be what governs them. So they're on their own as far as how they want to carry out their day-to-day activities. We alluded to, another big difference between a DSO and an ISO. Right now, we have student organizations that have private bank accounts. We have student organizations that may have a foundation account. They may have some money that's held in a departmental account for whatever purpose, and it will be very distinct and separate now. If you are departmental as a student organization and you collect membership dues, that money needs to be deposited into a departmental account. If you are, as a group, are a part of the university, your money is a part of the university. You can't have a private bank account. You can have a foundation account. You can have multiple department accounts, but it all has to be within the university. And then the opposite for an ISO, everything comes out of the university into a private bank account. Dr. Donnelly was first, I believe. So our goal is definitely not that we're going to evaluate where a group sits right now and push them into it. Our goal is that a group and the department they may be associated with makes a decision and then has a period of time to work towards that. So right now, these factors of a department student group with a bank account doesn't mean they can't be a department. It means you say we want to be a department, now how do we resolve the things that need to be cleaned up? That doesn't necessarily ease comforts, but that's the plan. For those following along online, the question is about SGA funding and the way it's going to be handled, and we need to work out what the student government code looks like for this. An independent student organization will apply for a financial award for whatever event they've planned, and they will receive that money that they can then deposit into their own bank account. It's paid out to their tax ID number, and then they will report back at the end of the year how that event went, how that money was used, and then that would be used for future decisions about funding. A department student organization that receives SGA funding, it will continue to be the exact same practice as it is right now. I would not anticipate a group would disappear because of that, because they don't have, the reason being they don't have to have that advisor anymore. We can't tell them they have to do that. We want them to, and we'll encourage them to because of the value that the advisors play, but it's no longer a requirement. Correct. Or they can go to someone in the community now. Correct.
And they have a liaison that they'll work with through the Center for Student Involvement.
So in my opinion, worst case scenario, a group chooses not to have an advisor anymore because I think that will impact their abilities. But the liaison from the center should hopefully still be providing some of that guidance advice that the advisor used to play. But it won't be the same because that hopefully all of our advisors are there at the meetings and at the events, and you should think about doing this and you should think about doing this, and we won't be able to play that exact same role. But hopefully we can get close. We'll talk a little bit about that in the end as well, but we'll start making decisions once school is started. So we have a whole few days for that. And then
Long time.
when we get to October, October 2nd right now is a Monday. And that's our goal, that we'll see how much progress we've made and hopefully say, okay, we're gonna start DSO, ISO status based on how many groups have registered by October 2nd, right? So I'm gonna skip ahead. We're gonna call an audible here. The plan is on August the 24th is the activities carnival for student organizations. So we're gonna have about 225 of our groups here in the building. We're gonna have some material for those groups as they're checking in. The center's gonna be open. Hopefully everyone can come ask questions. We're gonna kind of kick things off then. Registration will then open Friday the 25th. We will continue to operate until October 2nd, that everyone who's registered right now is registered. And that's not changing until October 2nd, and hopefully we've made enough progress that we can start everything again on October the 2nd. So that'll give you about 5 weeks to meet student organizations, meet with departments, make decisions, and do that registration process. Does that help on the time frame? You know, our goal, as we've talked about it, our goal in all of those questions is gonna be that the liaison for that category. So myself, I'm gonna work with academic competition teams and sports clubs and a few other groups, is trying to facilitate those kind of more one-on-one discussions of what does this group need? Because as we've tried to come up with, this is how it's gonna work for everyone, that's just not possible. So in some instances, we actually think we may have to go out and meet with the student group and the department to just help make sure everyone has the right information as they're trying to make decisions. And then in some others, it's gonna be sharing, you know, this is what a group's done and it really helped them get the financials worked out really, really well. So it's gonna be a lot of one-on-one contact for that period to help them do it. The way we're looking at the timeline though is until October 2nd, nothing has changed from now. We have 475 registered student organizations that have an advisor and a president, and we will continue to communicate with that advisor just like we did for the last 3 years about all these changes. Hopefully we get everything sorted out, all those questions, and then on October 2nd, if a group has chosen not to have an advisor anymore, we would go through and make sure that advisor didn't advise anyone else, and then we would just remove them from the list as far as being an advisor. So there's 2 things there. One, if you completed the process on August 25th to be cleared a DSO, then you're a DSO. So you could resolve it before you travel, which might be ideal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Otherwise, we would say it's still just as it was.
Judging teams, competitive teams, or debate teams, speech teams, those are departmental college affiliates.
And one other point, and then Sarah, is we know academic competition teams and sports clubs, as well as several of our student organizations, did work in the spring to get FY18 money, and that's not gonna change. That's all being grandfathered in. If the academic competition team gave you $3,000 for your FY18 events, that's not changing. We're not going back on anything like that. Sports clubs got an amount from the Sports Club Council. They'll get that. You got approved for allocations from an April Senate meeting. That's not going away either. So that will phase itself out as we move through those events.
Yes, you'll be able, just as that procedure now has been placed for a departmental club or association, they'll be able to have a procurement card, sure. Mm-hmm.
There's also some other things out there. They have declining balance credit cards to where they can put certain dollar amounts on it for whatever that department sets up, and then whoever's supposed to use that card can use that card. They've actually used study abroad as an example of someone that they've worked a lot with to change their accounting process for those students who are traveling, and how they can give them state money that they can access and use. So we have talked about options, and I think the best thing is going to be take a lot of the financial concerns to Fran and have her give answers.
And part of our risk management training for all advisors, whether it's independent or dependent, will cover how far do you go in terms of your responsibility. If it's a university activity, where do you draw the line, and how how you manage that risk. Right now, we're not, well, let's face it, in this room, we're not doing an adequate job. We are taking risks. You've signed contracts. You've got, I mean, I'm talking collectively. Yeah, right, we have. We've gone and we look back and we think maybe we have protection and maybe we don't. And that's what we're trying to resolve. So, Dr. Boggs, you're right. I mean, how do we adequately deal with risk? And we have to manage that. That's right. And we're not, and we're probably, I mean, many of you are multiple advisors to a variety of groups. It's an important part of our culture. And I'm thinking about the next 3 weeks as I meet with my groups, we're going to go over this very thing. Where do we draw the line? And there'd probably be at 10 o'clock at night, this activity is over. You're on your own. Don't wear your t-shirts. I'm going to bed. Which I've done probably, didn't do it formally,
Yeah.
but, or 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock, depending on, I'm sorry, I'm not minimizing. I'm saying it's going to be a process, Dr. Boggs, and we're all in it.
And that's honestly, that's it. There are going to be some hard decisions about if you want your own banking account and autonomy, then you may have to give up this. Now, there is special circumstances, it's not going to be frequent, where independent student organizations may be able to enter into a contract somehow with the university saying they would have access to something. We shouldn't plan on that resolving all of these issues, but it is possible in certain scenarios to address the things that simply cannot be addressed any other way. So if that was a unique situation like
Also,
that.
we know that we have some space on the campus that donors have given specifically to a student organization, and they feel like they own that space, and we're gonna have to resolve those issues as well on a case-by-case basis. Got some question over here. Dr. Westman? And by co-sponsoring an event, the department then is responsible for that event in terms of risk management. That's the mantra. That's the mantra. Thank you for that.
That probably gets difficult when it comes to actual physical permanent space, co-sponsoring, but.
I'm thinking more on an event basis.
Right,
Those things that
right.
happen where there's really an intertwined relationship
For
between
sure.
certain student groups and department or
And just before we move on for it, that specific concept of co-sponsoring came up in regards to motor pool. On the list, you'll see ISOs won't be allowed to use motor pool for their independent events. But if the department is co-sponsoring with an ISO that's related to them, and the department is accepting the responsibility and providing the employee, and it doesn't mean that a member of an ISO can never ride in a K-State van again. It just means they can't make a decision to host an independent event and use motor pool for that event. They can't do it independently. Tough choices. I mean, and to some extent, it'll be a combination of making the choice of DSO versus ISO. If they choose to go ISO, are there ways to still have space available to them that doesn't create that connection that they are departmental? Whether it's considered to be open space and they just use it most? What's that? I know.
Yeah.
No, I know. I know.
It might be an opportunity for us to check into a contract arrangement.
Could be the situation.
That might be a way to solve that.
But it would have, the nice thing about it then is it clearly defines what is the university's responsibility when an ISO is in that space. And that's what helps address the things of it's keeping it out of the gray area, but still providing them what they need.
I think that might be the way. That might be one way of responding. The other might be a specific contract for services in the building and responsibility tied to those experiences. Again, it's all about risk. We have students in buildings, and what is our risk? And
If there is a contract, they're going to want to be involved.
Right.
Yeah.
just as they have been in the past, as we've entered contracts in departments and major units, our attorneys have been involved. I believe this is, Dr. Carr, I believe this is a major interest of our university family, and the attorneys would be available to help us.
And it wouldn't be our first contract.
Right.
We have contracted with Panhellenic to provide services to help them with recruitment, and came to a good contractual agreement, and we're about a little over halfway through recruitment, and things seem to be going well. And so that's been a workable arrangement so far as we get started here. So we'll look into it.
Yes, sir.
Well, remember, yeah, but remember that the heart of a DSO is that they're part of the university. They're part of that unit or college or department. They're doing the work of the unit. So if you have a group that's that involved with your organization, you're probably going to want to bring them in and work with them as a department sponsored. If they're not, if they're just outside or just part, but just distance from your group, from your unit, then they may want to be an ISO, and they could work with you to do various sponsorships and things. But if it's in, it is. But when you talk about ambassador groups and competition teams and those kinds of groups that really are part of the departments, then I think this just helps clarify that relationship and provides them some additional benefits. If you look as a DSO, you use the K-State branding, you have the support of an advisor that's in the unit. There's a lot of advantages to being a DSO if you are part of that unit. If you're not, then obviously an ISO is probably a better way to go. And truly, when we estimated initially, we thought probably at the breakout will be about 80% of our organizations will be an ISO. Probably about 20% may choose to be department. We'll see how that all washes out. That's our estimate right now anyway.
But specifically addressing the concept, first off, hopefully there's no covert. But what it's cleaning up is that gray space where a department may have been like, sure, we'll co-sponsor it, do whatever you want, and we'll sign off on it. And it's probably going to get rid of that now, because if you're co-sponsoring it, it's defining what that means. So the rubber stamping hopefully is ending, because now you realize, okay, I have to engage with this, and technically, co-sponsoring may not be the best term. It may be that those ISOs are participating in an event that the department is working on. I mean, it is going to be co-sponsoring, but who's held accountable is going to be that department that's sponsoring the event. So I don't see many departments who are just going to, sure, we'll do this, we'll do this, we'll do this, without engaging in the way they need to engage to make it a safe university event. So I'll share with you our thoughts on how it might work, but it is going to be up to Jack and his cohort. So currently, if you've gone through the SGA funding process, there's the college allocations and the university allocations, and the money is split 60-40 at the most, so it's kind of tried to be spread out. That alignment is not going to make any sense anymore, because that's no longer a consideration in how we're looking at our groups. And when you start looking at the fact that a DSO is going to get the full amount transferred to them, and an ISO is going to get an award that leaves the university, I think there's going to be significant differences in the way the students look at their decision making as how much money someone should get. So while it may not be even a completely separate fund, I would venture students will be far more comfortable giving money to a DSO, because they know that money will be used responsibly according to the state rules and everything. And there's going to be some trepidation of awarding money to an ISO and knowing how that's spent. So that may very well be the logical way of splitting up a large process into two, looking at it that way. We've also looked at maybe splitting it up as either it's travel or it's on campus, but the college and university is probably over. So it doesn't exactly answer it, but that's kind of where we're headed.
So I was going to add something to that as well, that I think right now there's some sort of precedent that exists with that, because when we look at the allocations process for any group, truly kind of regardless of the nature of the group, if a group has fundraised on their own or otherwise have other sources of income or sources of revenue or sources of support for that event, that changes the way in which we would allocate that money. And so I think it's I hadn't really thought of the context that Bill was saying, but I think, and granted, I don't have a vote in the student senate anymore, but but I think that it could be an interesting conversation about if a DSSO comes forward with an initiative that has full support of the department, that looks very different than an ISO coming forward that has nothing except for what SGA would give them. So I think it really depends kind of on I think classification is important, of course, but also like the dollars and cents of it, I think is probably more important in the context of, at least that's how we've allocated so far.
We've talked about, is there a way that we can provide insurance policy for ISOs, for DSOs, or whatnot? It's something we're considering. It's just that's going to be a 1.1 in the process. But yeah, especially there are sometimes then categories of groups that can even get specifics. Like we've talked about how a sports club can get specific recreational insurance through their national organization and stuff. So it's a possibility. It's just risk and reward of the cost of that. So when it comes to, again, we're using departmental, but a college council, the college can sponsor. Like it doesn't have to be a department. It's an official K-State entity. We try to get in the habit of saying college department or other unit, but that's a lot of words. But collegiate 4-H is an example of may not have a close tie to a department. So would a college be interested in supporting it in that way, and all that implies? Or there's the other situation where there's some groups that have 4 departments that are heavily involved in them. Or multiple college, yeah. So, case by case basis, we work through those as best we can, try to resolve where the best fit for everyone is. Excellent question. Excellent question, no. Any registered student organization may create their own logo that they want to use. That logo may not use K-State marks in the creation of that logo if they are an ISO. But anyone may create their own logo. It's not the thing that the departments deal with where communications and marketing says, no logos, no. They can establish that and use that. A DSO, if you didn't get it on your way in, as you get it on your way out, we made a copy of the new page in the brand guide that talks about this. A DSO may continue to use any of the K-State marks in association with their materials, their a name, anything like that. An ISO cannot use the marks as they wish. There's a more limited use of an independent student organization logo that has been created for them that contains the Power Cat. They can use the names Kansas State and Kansas State University as a location descriptor. So the knitting club at Kansas State, but it cannot be the Kansas State Knitting Club if they're an ISO. They can do everything that the sponsoring department can do as well. Now you can't, mess with the Power Cat because nobody can do that. But yeah. The other thing I just want to add, and then Jody, I've ignored you twice. I apologize. So for the ISOs, and we've worked a lot with the Student Design Center to make sure they will understand these policies, and then they are going to be super helpful, right, Audrey? Super helpful in creating those logos and helping provide those materials, at least initially free of cost, and developing, not the materials, but the work in designing them to the ISOs. So there is a resource available to them for creating logos that will comply with the guidelines and creating materials that will be able to be distributed within those guidelines. Is that fair? And if your ISO wants to contact them, what should they do? Jody?
Before Jody answers her question, I need to talk to the band, and they're waiting for me. I greatly appreciate the attitude in this room. You care a great deal about our students, our student organizations. I don't feel there's a negative comment here. You're asking great questions. I appreciate the very nature of what you do for our university family. I mean that very, very sincerely. This is a change, a clarification, an opportunity for us to get stronger in a variety of areas. So I greatly appreciate your questions, but more importantly, the overall attitude of us wanting to do something that's going to be right for our student groups and for our university. With that, I'm going to turn you over to Heather and Bill. Bill, thank you for your work here.
Okay, Judy. It is the university, correct. So a couple things. An ISO, if they were ever receive SGA funds, they'll have to go out, just like now, go out and request a tax ID number from the IRS. You are not tax exempt as an ISO. Everyone has to collect sales tax and pay that. But a DSO now gains the benefit of being tax exempt, of being a charitable organization. So donations, through the foundation are tax. I'm not an accountant, but you get a lot of that financial benefit that comes with being a part of the university, whereas ISOs do not. One other thing that we have never talked about in here, but if you are working with a ISO that has community living, if you grab the policy, there's also a piece in there that just talks about that ISOs with community living will be required to register as a business with this, or an entity,
LLC.
I don't know the term,
LLC.
with the state of Kansas. So just further separating that it has its own entity as opposed to being a part of K-State. Does that help, Jody? Is that? Yeah. Yes. So a couple things. One, if you received the message earlier in the summer from our office talking about the change, we talked about how OrgSync was going to go away and we were going to have the new system in place this fall for that. And I really appreciate their candid nature when we were talking with the people who were helping us transition. They said, it's really not going to be ready for you. You don't want to do this yet. So that being said, while the new system is going to be great for student organizations, and it's actually going to make this process of DSO versus ISO and 10 categories much easier, we're not going to make that change yet. So there is a way for us to display in OrgSync. We'll continue to display all student groups. When you click on that group's name, there's a spot where we can provide in the profile, department, student organization, independent student organization. On the Center for Student Involvement website also, we break out and display all of the student organizations by category as well as all of them. And we'll also have that DSO versus ISO status on that pop-up. So there'll be ways for everyone to find that, facilities, the union, anyone who needs to look that up. Yes, they can do fundraising. It was made very clear by Fran that sources of money for a student organization that exist now will continue to exist and can go into those accounts. And I believe it gets back to kind of that conversation of what the source of the money was. I cannot fathom a way that would be open up to the callbacks, but we will ask that question and get it written down, answering that question for us, because that would be tragic. I'll say it for the people watching online too. Can a DSO use something like crowdsource funding, Kickstarter campaign, things like that? So I know an ISO can, and off the top of my head, I don't know what would keep a DSO from doing that, but we will, Heather's writing that down, I believe, so we will get a definitive answer for that. The conversation did come up about ISOs who have a foundation account currently for the sole purpose of providing scholarships to K-State students. And the opinion from attorneys as well as financial services was there will be a way to make that work because it's not for the benefit of the group, it's for the benefit of the student to attend the university, and that still furthers the mission of the university. So those foundation accounts should not be a part of not being allowed. My educated guess on that is almost all of the ISOs will continue to want to work with their advisor. I'm getting a little sense maybe that some of the ISO advisors may no longer want to do that, so that number has now educatedly dropped a little. But I will also bet that most new ISOs will not find one. So as a new group onboards, you mean I can either wait and go ask someone, or I can just sign up without someone? Sign up. So that was
And I think it might make a difference whether we're able to look into any liability coverage for our ISO advisors, which we are definitely going to check into. So if you knew you could be an advisor to an ISO and have some liability coverage, that would probably change your decision making significantly. Well, this doesn't change for our actually, I think in some ways, with the support that the Center for Student Involvement is going to be able to provide these groups, that in some ways it's going to enhance their ability to have excellent organizations. And a lot of advisors, I think, will still choose to be with their groups, but then they're all going to have a baseline of support that I think is going to be pretty substantial benefit for our student groups. And in addition, you know, when we talk about our new K-State 360 and encouraging students to get involved and being able to document that on their co-curricular transcript, to have that documented about the value of being involved in organizations, I don't think we're going to see a difference at all. If anything, I think we're going to see that students feel more supported and feel really excited about developing their co-curricular experiences onto the K-State 360.
And a couple of the other benefits just to add on is one, honestly, an ISO, it's becoming easier for them to become a student group now because they don't even have to find an advisor. I mean, it means that as a student, I can find 5 members and my constitution and the basics, and I can get that out in 30 minutes and I'm done. So hopefully it's not going to discourage people from going through that, hopefully.
Yeah. So within the set, is there any other questions? I wanted to be sure and
Dr.
let you.
Washburn had them. So as we were finishing the policy over the last 2 weeks, I know there was becoming a backlog at licensing at K-State and the vendors were working with them. When the policy got finished on Friday, Tammy began working with all those vendors to get all those currently ones either processed and approved because of the type of group, or this is what you need to do to change it, and all this will make it work. And now that the policy, we'll work on getting that ISO logo out to people. They'll have a copy of the brand guide. DCM has helped extensively, so they're all very familiar with it. So the licensed vendors should be educated about it very quickly. And if they're not, if something comes through that is a problem, it'll just get corrected in that process, hopefully very quickly. And so for everyone who had to wait, apologies, but they should be flowing through now. One of the nice things that's come from this is, I think the Office of Student Activities has taken the approach of, you know, we're not gonna provide advice about we'll tell you where to go get the good advice, but we're not providing it. Going through this process has really helped us establish what can we do, how much can we offer? And so we've talked about methods where maybe even the center can provide a 1/10 FTE person to come in and provide tax and legal advice, accounting advice to student organizations. Like, we now know what the possibilities are because we better define the relationship between us and the student organizations. Now we can provide more information in a better way. But I'll also say providing the information is great, but we have to find good ways to get the message across, not just setting it out there and hoping they find it. And that'll be a challenge. And hopefully that liaison will have, instead of, you know, an office working with 500 groups, you're gonna have a person working with 60 to 80 groups maybe. Hopefully that's a better relationship with better information flow.
And so you can see that right up here on the screen. So the Center for Student Involvement includes the merger of the staff that was in fraternity, sorority life, and the Office of Student Activities and Services. So we've worked this summer to define who is going to be working with what groups. So you'll see right now who's been assigned to work with, to be a liaison for what group. And then we're also going to be having specialty areas where we'll have, for instance, Jordan Coker will be developing leadership training for all of our different categories. And Ashley will work on registration and event planning, and right now she's our current events planner, so she has expertise in that area. So she'll liaison with her groups, but she'll also offer all the liaisons within Center for Student Involvement the information about event management and coordination. Karen?
Quick question. So the slide which had the comparison of the DSO and ISO, is that going to be available for us to be able to share out? These documents are obviously useful, but that offer a quick snapshot
Does.
of the categories. And I don't know if this information can be shared out
Yep.
to the campus community or
Yep.
to our advisors, so we can take this information to
Right.
our.
Right. So everything that's here today is on our website now, right, with this link to the streaming. But marketing is also working on developing some of this information into good material that can be, both attractive and useful. And so we're going to get there hopefully next week. Like, we want to have some of this stuff in hand Thursday night, and then moving forward Friday morning.
Just a point for some of the folks who came in, the handout slides were not there for a while. They may have come in about 13 weeks ago.
We broke our copier making copies today.
Any other questions? Yes.
I do wonder, is the center going to be equipped enough for, say, a group that chooses to become an ISO but has previously relied very heavily on advisor involvement and maybe they no longer have an advisor? Are they going to be able to get that same sort of like one-on-one support?
So every liaisons will provide support for all groups. But if there's into the daily organizational decisions and support, no, they're not going to be at every meeting, spending, right. It's more, yes, it's more broad.
Now we can. I will say, like, not with one specific event. We can provide the best practice for a specific type of event, but we're not going to come help execute the event, if that makes sense. So.
Some of our groups, I think, are quite reliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And hopefully we can also provide some help in, here are people who are willing to serve as an advisor, as a volunteer advisor.
Any other questions? Well, thanks so much for coming today. Like Bill said, all the information is on the website now at the Center for Student Involvement. Thanks.